In lab mice, cutting protein intake by roughly half extended lifespan by as much as 53%. That number comes from a new review published on July 31 in the journal Cell Press Blue, where a University of Wisconsin-Madison team led by researcher Dudley Laming combed through more than 350 studies spanning mice, flies, yeast, and humans. The review lands directly against a diet trend that has dominated wellness culture for years. Eat more protein. Hit your daily gram target. Treat protein as the one nutrient you can never get too much of. This review says the opposite pattern shows up again and again in the data. Lower protein intake, not higher, tracks with better metabolism, less inflammation, and longer life across the studies researchers could find. This story covers what the review actually found. The hormone doing most of the work. Who this finding does not apply to. And how much a 350 study review should actually change what you eat. The mechanism the review keeps returning to is a hormone called fibroblast growth factor 21, or FGF21, made mostly by the liver. When protein intake drops, especially intake of three specific amino acids, methionine, isoleucine, and valine, the building blocks that make up protein, FGF21 levels rise. Once FGF21 rises, it appears to increase how much energy the body burns, improve how effectively cells respond to insulin and control blood sugar, and lower chronic low-grade inflammation, the slow-burning kind linked to heart disease, diabetes, and age-related decline. Across the animal studies in the review, restricting those specific amino acids produced metabolic improvements similar to restricting protein altogether, which is why researchers now think FGF21 is not just correlated with the effect. It may be a primary driver of it. This is not a brand new idea. FGF21's role in metabolism has been studied for over a decade. What is new is a 350 study synthesis pulling the amino acid data, the hormone data, and the lifespan data into one consistent picture instead of treating them as separate findings. Protein has spent the last several years as the one macronutrient wellness culture agreed never to question. Protein powders, high-protein snack bars, gram tracking apps, and advice to eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight all rest on the same assumption. More protein builds more muscle. And muscle is unambiguously good for long-term health. So protein intake should trend upward. The review does not dispute that protein builds muscle. What it disputes is the leap from protein builds muscle to more protein is better for long-term health in general. A leap the review says the aging and metabolism data does not support. Across the studies analyzed, higher protein intake tracked with faster activation of a cellular growth pathway called mTOR, which drives cell growth and repair in the short term but appears to accelerate cellular aging. Markers when kept elevated for years. In plain terms, the same pathway that helps you build muscle after a workout may work against you metabolically if it stays switched on constantly, which is closer to what eating high protein at every meal produces. Laming was explicit that this review is not a blanket instruction to eat less protein. And the caveats matter as much as the headline finding. People who exercise regularly and are actively building or maintaining muscle mass need enough protein to support that repair process. And cutting intake too aggressively in that group can backfire by accelerating muscle loss rather than preventing aging. Pregnant women have higher protein needs to support fetal growth. Full stop. Older adults face a separate, competing risk. Age-related muscle loss, called sarcopenia, which some research suggests may require higher, not lower, Protein intake past a certain age to prevent frailty and falls. That creates a genuine tension the review does not fully resolve. The same population most worried about aging, older adults, may need more protein for their muscles even as lower protein appears to help their broader metabolism. The honest reading is that protein needs are not one number for every person at every life stage. They shift with age, activity level, and health status, which is a far less marketable message than eat more or eat less. The overwhelming majority of the lifespan data behind that 53% number comes from mice, flies, and yeast, not humans. And animal lifespan studies have a long history of not translating cleanly to people. Caloric restriction research went through the same excitement decades ago. And the human evidence still is not settled. This is a review, not a new clinical trial. Lamming's team synthesized existing published research rather than running a controlled experiment of its own. So the strength of the conclusion depends entirely on the quality of the 350 studies being summarized. And reviews can amplify whichever findings got published, missing the negative results that never made it into a journal. The human evidence that does exist is mostly observational, tracking people's existing diets rather than randomly assigning some to eat less protein. Which means the same cause or correlation problem shows up here as in any nutrition study of real people eating real food. There is no long-term randomized human trial testing whether deliberately lowering your protein intake extends your life, and there will not be one for years. Treat this as a well-supported hypothesis, not a settled dietary recommendation. Quick recap. A University of Wisconsin-Madison review of more than 350 studies found that lower protein intake and lower intake of the amino acids methionine, isoleucine, and valine specifically, consistently tracks with improved metabolism, reduced inflammation, and extended lifespan in animal studies, driven largely by a hormone called FGF21. The effect has not been confirmed in a human clinical trial, and people who exercise heavily, are pregnant, or are older adults managing muscle loss may need more protein, not less. So, signal or noise? Split verdict. The mechanism is signal. FGF21's role in metabolism is well-established science. And a 350 study synthesis finding the same pattern repeatedly across species is a real, publishable result worth taking seriously. But the leap to you personally should eat less protein is noise. Because the human lifespan data does not exist yet. And the review's own author says the message is not protein is bad. It is protein needs are personal. The honest takeaway is that the push to maximize protein at every meal was probably oversimplified. Not that the opposite extreme is now correct. Subscribe for the nutrition claims that get separated from the marketing behind them. Signal from the noise. Every week.